Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2? Classic, mate. Classic, like Chris de Burgh or Fat Willie's Surf Shack. It's a classic. I remember when it first came out. I'm that old. And it was brilliant. You know, the first Resident Evil, classic B-movie charm, popularised a genre, survival horror, and Resident Evil 2 was all that and more in a ludicrous police station. A ludicrous police station full of puzzles and statues that just made all of the cops look weird, and they hand-waved it away, you know. It's set in an old museum and we just turned it into a police station and kept all of the puzzles and the statues and all the weird, creepy shit. But that is Raccoon City all over, isn't it? It's a city planning nightmare. So, this is Resident Evil 2, a remake of a beloved game. A remake people have wanted for, well, a really long time. Longer than some of you have been alive, probably, if you're one of the 0.1% of people who are under the age of 50 who watch me. Yeah, people have wanted this since shortly after the remake of Resident Evil, the first one, which, if I recall correctly off the top of my head, was a GameCube game initially. And then once that came out again, once they remastered the remake for current gen consoles and for the PC, I imagine, again, just remembering off the top of my head, people again were like, where's my Resident Evil 2? Where is it? And we've got it now, and it's really quite good. It's brilliant, mate. If you like survival horror, if you like Resident Evil, if you've been waiting for this remake, I can quite wholeheartedly recommend it. It's creepy, and it's kooky, mysterious and spooky. It's altogether ooky. It's Resident Evil 2. With its close-quarter perspective and emphasis on gunfire, Resident Evil 2 takes quite a few pages from the book of Resident Evil 4. But don't let that fool you. This is not a straightforward shift to action like Resident Evil 4 was. This is still very much a horror game. You cannot realistically go into combat gung-ho with everything you see. Trying to avoid enemies is still preferable. The third-person shooting works fantastically. Ever since 4, Resident Evil's been very good at giving you a more deliberate aiming system that lets you really get a feel for where you're shooting so that you don't miss all that often, as long as you're careful and don't panic, which, being a Resident Evil game, can and does happen. But generally, it's not a great idea to fight everything because the zombies are more or less fucking Scarface, and they will not go down easy. Sometimes it takes up to 6 headshots. That's 6 shots to the head, one after the other, to keep them down, if you're lucky. Unless you really luck out and score a whole bunch of critical shots that blow their heads up. I did go through one area at one point where I was just dropping zombies left and right with headshots that blew their heads up, but that doesn't happen all the time. They are ludicrously durable, and that can be an issue sometimes because it feels like they tried to straddle the line at points between action and survival horror and didn't quite get the balance right. So you feel like your resources are being drained in a way that doesn't allow you to keep up with the enemies, which wouldn't be a problem if avoiding them were easier than it is. A lot of the encounters are in tight spaces against enemies that have really powerful grab attacks. Their ability to lunge at you and take hold of you is impressive, to be honest. You can get out of grab attacks if you have a sub-weapon equipped. If you've got a knife or a grenade or something like that, you can give that to the enemy, more or less, and get out of their hold. But if you don't have one of those, then an enemy will grab you and just chow down. and it can get rather annoying instead of scary. There was one point in particular when I was playing where I'd been poisoned by an enemy that had just grabbed me when I tried to get past it, and I was trying to rush to a save point because I'd just picked something up. I was going back and forth in this area, and it was annoying to get through, and a zombie jumped me from behind a doorway. I walked through the doorway, the zombie was waiting in ambush, grabbed me, and rather than jump in fright, I just yelled, "Oh, fuck off," because it was the last thing I needed at that point. And that's a shame when a jump scare or an enemy ambush doesn't startle you or get you into the mood for a fight or flight situation. It just makes you yell "fuck off" because you can't be bothered with it. The lickers are a good example. The game tells you that they can't see, so you can sneak past them, but they always seem to hang out in really tight corridors, blocking your way. You can't get past them without alerting them, which, again, not a problem if you've got a way around it. If you've got a flashbang grenade, for example, throw that somewhere. When it goes off, the lickers will fly into a frenzy at the point where the flashbang went off. But again, if you don't have it, you're buggered. For the most part, the enemies are intimidating and scary, more than annoying though, and when this game gets scary, it really gets scary. I said this when I played the demo, but this game puts paid to that argument that the original Resident Evil, the initial survival horror games, back when there was a boom in the 90s for them, worked because of stodgy tank controls worked because of the fixed camera angles, and that's what made them scary, because you don't have adequate controls to get away from the enemies. How frightening. This game, with wonderfully designed zombies that sound horrifying, real blood-curdling noises, look grotesque, just dripping in fluids and juice, pouring through police station windows at you, all the while you're being chased by Mr. X, who is stomping after you with this great music that signals his arrival. The soundtrack here is really, really good, and Mr. X, the tyrant, is terrifying. It really is a treat of a remake. I have my one complaint about it, but it really is just the one. The game looks gorgeous. I love the lighting effects. The gore effects are just stomach-turning. The story has been streamlined, and so everything moves at a snappier pace, but there's still plenty to do, and 2 campaigns, of course, one for Leon, one for Claire, more like Claire Deadfield instead of Claire Redfield, huh? And more like Leon Dead Kennedys. Voice acting is decent. The facial expressions that go along with the voice acting can be somewhat disturbing, a touch uncanny valley. The only major complaint I could have about the voice acting is sometimes the in-game responses from a character are delivered without context. So, for example, Leon could say, "Are you kidding me?" after he's shot zombies in the head, about 6 times. Right after he's already done that to 3 other zombies, and it just seems a bit weird that he's picking this one to be surprised by. Another thing might be he's just closed a door on a zombie, and the zombie starts bashing on the door, and he says, "What the hell?" in a startled voice that suggests he completely forgot the zombie he'd just shut the door on. That kind of thing, where they have these canned responses to situations, but the game doesn't know what transpired beforehand, which can turn some of those responses into moments of humour, which isn't a huge complaint, because it is still quite amusing. Another shout out for the monster sounds though, the screaming of the zombies and the snarling of the lickers, it all really is quite delectable. Resident Evil 2 is a reminder that horror games can have decent controls. Horror games can give you a gun, even. It doesn't always have to be like Amnesia or Outlast, or another game where you run away solely from enemies and that's all you do. Not that there's a problem with those games. I love games where you're just running from stalkers if they're done well. The market was sort of oversaturated with those. But this game, where you have typical action commands, but the enemies are still horrific and make you want to run away from them real fast, it's a treasure. It's wonderful to see this again. This is one of those remakes that's so full on. It is its own game. It could be judged as a brand new game release. And it's incredible fun, ultimately. I cannot recommend it enough. Despite my one glaring fault with it, it's not an issue that comes up throughout the entire game. For the most part, as long as you're careful, you will have the resources you need to survive. There are boss encounters, which I won't show here, but they are all great. They're reimagined. There were some nostalgic moments when I came face to face with characters like Birkin, and I'm really pleased with the way they've redone those fights. Restructured them, redesigned the bosses, not dramatically, they still look like they used to, but now so much more detail, so much more sickening textures and effects. It's like the old warning says, this game contains scenes of explicit violence and gore, and Resident Evil 2 has those in abundance, and it's all done really, really well. And by well, I mean really nastily. But I mean that as a compliment, because ew, this game, ew. And that's your Resident Evil 2. It's really good. It's really, really quite good indeed.